They found her wandering the highway at dawn, barefoot and trembling, clutching a leather journal that would expose the darkest fortune in American history. This is the story of Eleanor Whitmore, the 11th bride who survived what 10 others could not, and the billions hidden beneath floorboards soaked in secrets. What you're about to hear happened in the autumn of 1970, in a decaying mansion outside Charleston, South Carolina. A place where brides arrived with hope and left with nothing but fear. But Eleanor was different. She stayed long enough to uncover what was buried there, and what she found changed everything. The Whitmore estate sat at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by oak trees draped in Spanish moss. It looked like something from a Southern Gothic novel, all crumbling columns and peeling paint. The kind of place people drove past quickly, avoiding eye contact with the windows. Inside lived Thomas Whitmore, a man in his late 40s with silver hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was charming when he needed to be, the kind of man who could convince you the sky was green if he wanted to. Thomas had been married 10 times before Eleanor. 10 brides who walked through those heavy wooden doors with dreams of building a life, only to flee in the middle of the night. Some left after weeks, others lasted months, but none made it past a year. The pattern was always the same. They arrived full of hope, and they left broken, refusing to speak about what happened inside those walls. The locals whispered about it in diners and church parking lots. Something was wrong with that house, they said. Something evil lived there, but no one could prove anything. The brides never filed complaints, never went to the police. They just vanished into new lives, carrying secrets they would never share. Eleanor Hayes was 26 when she met Thomas at a charity gala in Atlanta. She was a librarian, quiet and observant, with auburn hair and green eyes that missed nothing. Thomas approached her near the champagne fountain, complimenting her emerald dress and asking about the book she was reading. He seemed cultured, educated, interested in her thoughts rather than just her appearance. Within 3 months, they were engaged. Her friends warned her. They had heard rumors about Thomas Whitmore and his broken marriages, but Eleanor dismissed their concerns. People exaggerate, she told them. Everyone deserves a second chance, or in his case an 11th. She moved into the mansion in September 1970, carrying 2 suitcases and a hopeful heart. The house was larger than she expected, with 23 rooms spread across 3 floors. Most were locked. Thomas said they were under renovation, that he would open them once the work was complete. Eleanor accepted this explanation, at least at first. The first week was almost normal. Thomas was attentive, cooking breakfast and asking about her day. But Eleanor noticed small things. The way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. The locked doors throughout the house. The basement entrance chained shut with a padlock. When she asked about it, Thomas smiled and said it was just old storage, nothing interesting down there. By the second week, the rules started appearing. Don't go into the West Wing after dark. Don't open the mail. Don't answer the phone unless he was home. Each rule came with a reasonable explanation, but together they formed a cage. Eleanor felt the walls closing in, the same walls that had trapped 10 women before her. She started exploring when Thomas left for his mysterious business trips. He traveled often, sometimes for days, never explaining where he went or what he did. Eleanor used those absences to search the house, looking for answers to questions she was only beginning to formulate. In the library, she found a photograph tucked inside a first-edition novel. It showed Thomas standing in front of the mansion, but he looked younger, maybe 20 years younger. Beside him stood a woman in a wedding dress, her face scratched out with something sharp. On the back, someone had written in shaky handwriting, "Number 3. God help her." Eleanor's hands trembled as she placed the photo back. She wanted to leave right then, to pack her bags and run like the others had. But something kept her there. A stubborn curiosity, maybe. or the growing certainty that if she left without understanding why, she would spend the rest of her life wondering what she had missed. The breakthrough came 3 weeks into her stay. Thomas had left for another trip, kissing her forehead and promising to return by Friday. Eleanor waited until his car disappeared down the gravel road, then she went to work on the basement lock. She had found a set of old keys in the kitchen drawer, hidden beneath dishcloths and rubber bands. The third key fit. The basement stairs creaked under her weight, each step protesting her descent into the darkness below. She clicked on the light switch, and a single bulb illuminated a space that looked nothing like storage. The basement was organized, almost obsessively so. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall. A large desk sat in the center, covered in ledgers and documents, and against the far wall stood a massive safe, the kind banks used in the 1920s. Eleanor started with the filing cabinets. Inside, she found folders labeled with women's names. Patricia, Jennifer, Margaret, Susan, 10 folders total, 1 for each bride. Each contained the same items: a marriage certificate, a divorce agreement signed under duress, and a cashier's check for $50,000. Hush money, payment for their silence about whatever they had discovered in this house. But discovered what? Eleanor kept searching, pulling open drawers and scanning documents with growing urgency. The ledgers on the desk showed financial transactions, but the amounts didn't make sense. Millions of dollars moving in and out of accounts, coded with strange abbreviations and reference numbers. Then she found the manifest. It was buried in the bottom drawer of the desk, inside a folder marked Shipping Records, 1945-1950. Eleanor's breath caught as she read the entries. Art collections from Munich, jewelry shipments from Paris, gold transfers from Berlin. All dated between 1945 and 1947, right after World War II ended. Thomas Whitmore's father had been a soldier stationed in Germany during the war's final days. According to the documents, he had helped recover valuable items from abandoned estates and war zones. Recovered was the polite word. Looted was more accurate. Stolen from Jewish families, museums, private collections, and anyone who couldn't defend their property in the chaos of a collapsing regime. The Whitmore fortune, the money that built this mansion and funded Thomas's lifestyle, was blood money. Billions in stolen art, jewelry, and gold smuggled back to America and hidden in plain sight. Some pieces had been sold over the decades, but according to the inventory lists, most remained in Thomas's possession, tucked away in storage facilities and safety deposit boxes across 3 states. Eleanor sat at the desk, her mind racing. This was why the brides fled. They had discovered the truth about the Whitmore wealth, and Thomas had paid them to disappear quietly. $50,000 to forget what they had seen, to sign agreements promising they would never speak of it. The alternative, Eleanor suspected, was far worse than hush money. What would you have done in that moment? Would you have run, or would you have kept digging? Let me know in the comments below, because Eleanor made a choice that night that changed everything. She didn't run. Instead, she took photographs. She had brought a small Polaroid camera, the kind that developed pictures instantly. Eleanor photographed every document, every ledger entry, every page of the manifest. She worked methodically, organizing the evidence into a timeline that told the complete story of the Whitmore fortune. Then she found the safe combination. It was written on a piece of paper taped to the underside of the desk drawer, as if Thomas never expected anyone to search this thoroughly. The safe opened with a heavy click, revealing stacks of jewelry cases, rolled paintings in protective tubes, and gold bars stamped with Nazi insignia. Eleanor photographed it all. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. Thomas Whitmore was living on a fortune built from one of history's greatest crimes, and he had spent decades silencing anyone who discovered the truth. She returned upstairs as dawn broke. her camera full of evidence and her mind full of plans. Thomas would return in 2 days. She needed to be gone before then, but more importantly, she needed to ensure this evidence reached the right people. The authorities, the families who had lost everything, the world that deserved to know the truth. Eleanor spent the next day making copies of her photographs at a print shop in town, telling the clerk she was working on a historical research project. She mailed packages to 3 different addresses: a journalist at the Washington Post, an attorney who specialized in war crimes, and the FBI field office in Charleston. Each package contained complete documentation of the Whitmore fortune and its origins. Then she packed her suitcase and left. No note, no explanation. She walked down that gravel road at sunset, carrying everything she owned and feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Behind her, the mansion stood silent, keeping its secrets for just a little while longer. Thomas returned to an empty house. He searched for Eleanor, calling her friends and family, but no one knew where she had gone. It took him 3 days to check the basement. When he saw the safe standing open and the filing cabinets disturbed, he knew exactly what had happened. The FBI arrived the following week. They came with search warrants and art recovery specialists, dismantling the Whitmore fortune piece by piece. Thomas tried to flee, but was arrested at the Atlanta airport with a suitcase full of diamonds and a one-way ticket to Argentina. The trial lasted 6 months. Eleanor testified, explaining how she had discovered the stolen treasures and documented everything in that basement. The evidence she had gathered was instrumental in convicting Thomas Whitmore of receiving stolen property, fraud, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, but the story doesn't end there. The recovered art and valuables were worth an estimated $3.7 billion, making it one of the largest art recovery cases in American history. Museums reclaimed stolen paintings. Families received jewelry that had belonged to their grandparents. Gold was returned to its rightful owners, or when that was impossible, donated to Holocaust remembrance organizations. Eleanor received a reward from the FBI, a percentage of the recovered value that amounted to several $1 million. She donated most of it to organizations that helped victims of war crimes and cultural theft. With what remained, she opened a foundation dedicated to tracking down stolen art and returning it to its rightful owners. The 10 brides who fled before Eleanor were located and interviewed. Each confirmed they had discovered pieces of the truth, but had been too frightened to speak. The money Thomas offered them, combined with his implied threats, had been enough to buy their silence. Eleanor's bravery in documenting everything and going to the authorities had freed them from decades of carrying that burden. Today, the Whitmore mansion stands empty. The state seized it as part of Thomas's criminal assets, and it was sold at auction. The new owners converted it into a museum dedicated to art recovery and the fight against cultural theft. In the main hall, there's a photograph of Eleanor Hayes standing in front of the mansion, holding the leather journal where she kept notes during her investigation. The case changed how authorities tracked stolen art from World War II. It led to new international agreements and database systems that made it harder for looters to profit from stolen cultural property. Eleanor's evidence became a model for how to document and prosecute these crimes, even decades after they occurred. Thomas Whitmore died in prison in 1989, still claiming he had done nothing wrong, that he was simply inheriting what his father had left him. But inheritance doesn't cleanse theft, and ignorance isn't innocence when you work that hard to maintain it. Eleanor lived to be 83, passing away in 2027. She spent her life helping others find what was stolen from them, turning the darkest discovery of her youth into a mission that lasted 6 decades. She never remarried, saying once that she had learned everything she needed to know about people in those 3 weeks inside the Whitmore mansion. The 11 brides of Thomas Whitmore became a symbol of something important. 10 ran from the truth. saved themselves, and lived with the weight of what they knew. One stayed long enough to expose it, risking everything to ensure justice was served. There's no judgment in that observation. Each woman made the choice she had to make, and each survived in her own way. But Eleanor's choice meant that the families who lost everything got something back. It meant Thomas Whitmore faced consequences for living on stolen wealth. It meant the world learned the truth about billions in looted treasures hidden in a South Carolina mansion. What has always fascinated me about Eleanor's story is the question of what drives someone to stay when running would be so much easier. What makes a person choose truth over safety even when the cost could be everything? That kind of courage doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It simply shows up in basements and filing cabinets, in Polaroid photographs taken in secret, in packages mailed to journalists before dawn. The Whitmore case reminds us that history's crimes don't disappear just because time passes. They hide in basements and safety deposit boxes, in family fortunes built on theft, in silence purchased with hush money. And sometimes, it takes just one person willing to look closer, to stay longer, to risk more, to bring those crimes into the light. Think about the people in your own life who chose the harder path because it was the right one. Share their stories in the comments, because courage deserves to be remembered just as much as crime deserves to be exposed.